Members of the Middle East Quartet are meeting in Brussels later Sunday in the latest attempt to restart Israeli-Palestinian peace talks. Envoys from the US, European Union, United Nations and Russia will attend the gathering. The meeting comes amid criticism by some senior Palestinian officials over the performance of Tony Blair as the quartet's envoy. Charles Stratford reports from Ramallah.
The expected thing from him to do is to say, "I'm sorry, goodbye."
Another call from one of President Abbas's right-hand men for Middle East Quartet Special Envoy Tony Blair to step down. The allegations against Blair range from inappropriate business dealings to bias in favor of Israel.
The biggest problem that he did actually for us is that all of a sudden he started speaking against our step going towards the United Nations. You cannot be a mediator of a quartet in which 50% of the quartet, they support our step.
Palestinian officials accused Blair of trying to lobby European countries against Mahmoud Abbas's bid for statehood recognition at the United Nations. Blair says he totally understands the frustrations that led Abbas to make his move. British media reports have focused on claims Blair's other job as an advisor with the merchant bank JP Morgan has opened doors for numerous private business interests. Blair says the allegations are absolutely untrue.
We've seen the reports by the British media, which actually shows explicitly that Mr. Tony Blair has very serious conflict of interest in which he is doing business during the term of his official official duties. And I think that's not a very healthy situation. It does erode his credibility as an envoy for the quartet.
Al Jazeera spoke to a spokesperson for the Palestinian government who said the Palestinian Authority would not openly criticize Tony Blair. But by the sound of things, there's a lot being said behind closed doors.
The Palestinian leadership has raised this issue very seriously. The general consensus among the leadership is that he is not anymore an honest broker.
Al Jazeera provided details of all these allegations to Tony Blair's office in Jerusalem. In response, spokesman Matthew Doyle said any allegations of conflict of interest were, quote, defamatory and untrue. This really is a hatchet job from someone rather than based on fact, he said.
The claims that Tony Blair is no longer credible as an envoy for the Middle East Quartet is now being openly supported by certain senior Palestinian officials. And this has come as a really big surprise. The question is whether the debate over his performance will detract from the very real challenge of getting the Israelis and the Palestinians to restart their negotiations. Charles Stratford, Al Jazeera, Ramallah.
Well, Harry Hagopian is a lawyer and consultant to the EU and Middle East affairs. He also took part in informal negotiations during the Oslo period and joins us live from our London studio. Thank you very much for your time. So, in your opinion, is Tony Blair's role in jeopardy today? I mean, do the Palestinians or even Israelis, for that matter, have a say really on who or who can't be a peace envoy?
Not really. In a sense, I can understand the stories that have been going on. I've heard some of the statements that have been made by the Palestinian Authority leadership questioning the role that the Middle East envoy Tony Blair has had in the quartet. And I think they basically underline two issues. One is a sense of deep frustration, not only deep frustration to do with the UN statehood bid and his role in it, but also in the lack of progress with the negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians over many, many years. Remember, Tony Blair was appointed envoy in 2007. The other thing I think, Foley, is that there is a sense of perception, and perception plays a huge psychological factor in negotiations. I know that as a lawyer, many of the negotiators would tell you the same thing. So personally, I believe that while Blair might have said things or done things that were a bit out of sync with what would be expected of him, at the end of the day, he's an employee of the quartet. He's not the boss of the quartet. And therefore, what we should focus on is is more the policies that the quartet, as 4 groups coming together, and as Mr. Mohammed Shtiye said, there are 4 disparate groups with different ideas. That is where the problem lies, and that is where, in my opinion, more should be done.
But given your experience, when there's so much suspicion from one group, the Palestinians in this case, can he really continue in his role?
Well, it makes it extremely difficult. I mean, whether it's in the role of a mediator or a facilitator, whether it's in the role of a minister, when you have so much suspicion and so much questioning, and some even go so far as to label a person as a persona non grata in the West Bank and Palestinian territories, then the role of that person as an honest broker becomes extremely difficult. So I would say that this story could take 2 turns. Either it could turn worse in the sense that there would be an increase in the inability of Tony Blair to really be the envoy for the quartet, or alternatively, if we get a breakthrough in the quartet negotiations with Israel and the Palestinians, this might become a peripheral issue.
And so how much do you think the Palestinian bit of the United Nations has changed the dynamics in this case? I mean, how do you see this affecting the return to negotiations and the quartet's efforts to get the 2 parties talking again?
I think basically some people have misunderstood that bid. That bid will not change realities on the ground, in my estimation. It will not remove checkpoints. It will not do anything to the psychology of the people under occupation according to international law. But what it does do is it opens up this whole issue of the Israeli-Palestinian context from a bilateral one to a multilateral one, from one that is basically American-led to one that is UN and international community-led. And in that sense, it empowers other parties to play a role which might be good for peace and which might actually marginalize Tony Blair as being in the limelight of the negotiations.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hagopian, for your thoughts. Thanks for joining us there from London.
My pleasure.
The Dalai Lama has